Well, we got a good group. Give them a hand for all the children. That's great. They're happy to see you guys. You happy to be here? Man, I'll tell you what. All those people who had stuff left over from Halloween, they just dumped it in here this morning. So we thank all of those who are sharing the leftovers. So you can take more than one. I mean, you can take 2, 3 apiece. Okay. I assume these are for me, right? Oh. Oh, man. Okay. How come it goes in so hard and comes out so easy? Excuse us for the technical problem. Man. Okay, we'll start. Let me ask you this. Do any of you have people in your lives who you really treasure, who you like to be with, who set an example? Your Nana. Okay, that's a good one. Your mom and dad. Wow. What else? Mom. Okay. Mom and dad. Okay. Does everybody here have somebody that is kind of special to them? Uh-huh. Okay. You? Your grandma and grandpa. Okay. Well, what is it about them that you like? They care for you, right? They love you. They help you get things that you need, right? Okay. Now we got the people covered. So everybody has somebody that they think are important in their lives. Now, today is what we call All Saints Sunday. And we celebrate people who have gone before, some who have passed away, like some grandparents or great-grandparents. A lot of you still have grandparents living. But a lot of us have lost our grandparents and who were examples for us, who did good things for us, and we like to be there and visit them. Now, we say kind of in the church that they're saints. This doesn't mean that they're perfect, because sometimes we think if you say you're a saint, you're perfect. We aren't perfect, but we love God, and God loves us, and died for us, and we're important to him. And then he tells you to go out and do things for other people so they will look back at you and say, you are important in my life. You realize that every one of you can be important to somebody. Every one of you can be a good example to everybody else around you. Everybody can help somebody else. Do you agree with that? What else might you be able to do for somebody? Might be able to do what? Help them in their time of need. That's very good. Okay, help people who have trouble walking. That's really good. Okay, do you suppose any of you think you might be able to talk to somebody about Jesus? About God and how he loves you and how he loves them? That's important too. And if you are a saint, that's one of the things you do, is talk to others about Jesus. Give him a hand, please. Take it. You can take as much as you want. The Holy Gospel is written in the 5th chapter of St. Matthew, beginning at the 1st verse. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. Vignette number 1. One of those people who wrote those little synopses of towns or cities that you find in some bookstores, sometimes in the drugstores. These little give the history of a town. One of the people was doing that and commented as he went in and started this project. He went to a city in North Maine, and he said, "I wondered how I could find some details about what was going on." And then he said, "It dawned on me that I could go to the cemetery, look at some of the gravestones, and maybe I would discover something about an important event, someone who was particularly powerful or well-loved in the city." He said, "As I looked at the tombstones, they all had the same thing, just glowing words. This person was generous, kind, upstanding, noble, loving." He said, "I began to wonder where the sinners were buried." Vignette number 2. In a former parish, a person called me one day and asked if he could speak to me, and when he came, he said he would ask if I could perform a funeral for his uncle. And I said I would be happy to do that. And he said, "Well, let me tell you something about Uncle Clarence. He wasn't very nice. He was unkind to his parents. He was unkind to his children. He was unfaithful to his wife. He didn't have much of a belief at all, and his language wasn't good at all." And I said, "Well, I'm here not to pray him into heaven or to make any judgment on him. That's up to he and God, but I'll still conduct the funeral." Vignette number 3. A woman returned home for class reunion to North Carolina. And when she came to the reunion, she was talking to one of her classmates, and she was talking about how the town had grown and how it had prospered and how everything was looking so much better than when she left about 40 years ago. And she said, "You know, one of the great things about it is a cemetery. The cemetery has united families again. And her classmate said, well, how did that happen? And she said, well, you know, when I was here, the town wasn't much. It was very small. Everybody knew everybody. And they really didn't sell plots. They just, when somebody died, they just buried them. And it wasn't necessarily next to anybody they knew. But we just all knew where everybody was. But now, she said, husbands are next to wives. And children are next to parents. And it's so good to see. And her classmate said, in disbelief, don't tell me they exhumed all the bodies and reburied them. And she said, oh, no, they just rearranged the tombstones. There's something reassuring and comforting about rearranging the tombstones. Maybe if they rearrange the tombstones for me, I might have a better place. Maybe something better. And maybe Uncle Clarence would have something good said about him. Today is All Saints' Day. It is traditionally a very, very important day in the Catholic Church. And as your husband from Sweden said, it's one of the most important church holidays in Sweden. Not so much in the United States with the Protestant churches. But traditionally, All Saints' Day was a day in the Catholic Church where you honored those who were martyrs and those that had lived extraordinary lives. Now, when the Protestant Reformation took place, Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the church door at Wittenberg on All Saints' Eve because he knew that everybody would be there for worship on Sunday or on that day, and it would be a day when everybody would see his challenge to debate with him on some of the things that needed to be corrected. So very often in the Lutheran Church we lose All Saints' Day because it is so close to Reformation. We had Reformation Sunday last Sunday, so it's valuable, I think, to actually go back and look at All Saints' Day. Now, the Reformation introduced what a saint was. It was no longer somebody who was necessarily extraordinary, not somebody who had died for the faith, but somebody who was struggling in the faith, someone who believed in Jesus and his resurrection story and was struggling in life just to reflect that grace of God. When Paul wrote his letters to the people in the churches at Ephesus and Corinth and Thessalonica, he addressed them all as saints, meaning that all those who were belonging to the church were made saints not by what they did, but by the grace of God and their belief in that grace. And so now, All Saints not only refers to those who have gone before, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, but it also applies to us. We are designated as saints. And if somebody comes up and looks you in the face and says to you, I think you're a saint, you take it as a compliment. Sometimes you deny it with the idea that it's still to be interpreted as somebody who's a little holier than everybody else. But that's not what it means. It means you are struggling in the grace of Christ to do what you can to proclaim him and worship him and give him honor and glory. But celebrating All Saints' Day gives us the ability to focus on our own lives now, what God expects of us, to see how we've fallen short. And it gives us a chance to rearrange the tombstones in our life. Halloween was yesterday, and a couple of Halloweens ago, I saw a young girl who had a Superwoman costume. And she was very proud of this and evidently watched the show. But she was saying, I'm Superwoman. I'm tough. I can do anything. And she said, oh, Mom, would you please tie my shoes? And I said, this is kind of reflective of Christians. Sometimes we rejoice in our ability to witness to the gospel and that we are very faithful saints. And then we fail at the smallest thing. We keep falling short. Keep in mind All Saints' Day. It is important. And remember, you are saints, bought and paid for by the grace and love of God. And it can be reflected. It can be reflected in our lives. We are not supermen. We are not superwomen. We are not everything. We're not complete, certainly. But we dare to believe that God can rearrange our tombstones. One of the great ends of all time in NFL history was a man by the name of Chris Carter. He played briefly for the Philadelphia Eagles and then was let go and became one of the Minnesota Vikings. I think is one of the greatest ends in all of history. But at the end of his term with the Philadelphia Eagles, when he was released, he had a low point in his life. And at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony in 2013, Chris Carter talked about his life. He said, when I was dropped by the Philadelphia Eagles, he said, my whole world fell in. He said, I'd always been the best at everything. When I was in high school, I was the best there. I was the best student. And when I went to college, I was the best there. And when I was taken by the Philadelphia Eagles, I was presumed to be one of the best. And then all of a sudden, I found out they didn't want me. I was no longer of any value. Me. All the things that I had accomplished. And now I thought nobody wanted me. Now he did reveal that probably the coach of the Eagles got rid of him because of his drug problem, his use of ecstasy and cocaine. He would be a problem for the team. But he said, for the first time, I fell on my knees and I said, God, I just have not been what I should have been. And I'm willing to make a drastic change if you will help me. He said this was a turning point in his life. And he did resolve his problems. He did, up until recently, hold many records. But one of the things that he thought was most important now was to be a witness to his faith. And he talked about on the day when he was elected into the Football Hall of Fame. He was more concerned about talking about Jesus and what he meant in his life. And he became a witness to many of the others that were in the football on the Minnesota Vikings, including Randy Moss, who had a number of problems of his own and needed a lot of his tombstones rearranged. But that's what happens. That's what happens. To become a saint, sometimes you have to hit the bottom. But God is always there and reminds us that there is more that we can do in our lives that will not only enhance what we are to ourselves, but to everybody else that meets us. There's one practical application we can make to this coming week. We have a wonderful country. And our agreement as people is that We will come and vote, and however the elections turn out, we will obey the will of the majority, and we will have peace together and work together for harmony. It is unfortunate that all the cities are arming themselves with National Guard and are prepared for all kinds of breakout of civil discontent. If there's one practical thing you can do this week, is to pray for unity together. That we can sit down and have differences and yet love each other. And it's not that hard to do. I've done it a couple of weeks at time this last week when people were radically disagreed with me. But we always parted saying, I love you. I care for you. And we will get it through it together. In the movie Sally Field, I think the name of it was Places in the Heart. Places in the Heart is about a family where the husband was a policeman. He was called to some domestic quarrel, and after that he got involved in something whereby he was killed. The story is about the woman played by Sally Field who struggles through life in her hometown and is buoyed up by the townspeople who care, who support her. And in the meantime, they teach, I guess, those that were involved in the murder how to rearrange tombstones in their life. There's an interesting segment at the end of the movie whereby there is a church much like this, a small church, a small town, and communion is being held. And they pan the congregation. And first of all, you see Sally Field, her family, and then is seated next to her husband. And the three people who were involved in the murder. And then one by one, all the rest of the townspeople there together. That's not the way it is it? But instinctively, we know as saints of God, that's the way it should be. That we have an obligation to care for him as he cared for us. We celebrate this church today. We celebrate the people that settled it, that made it strong, that made it a picture to look at in the countryside, to give us a bearing. We are so thankful for today, for the saints that went before us. And they are saints. And hopefully there will people that will come after us, and our children's children will look to us and say they were saints. Not because we were perfect. Not because we did everything right. Not because we didn't disagree or fight at times, but because we cared enough about our God and about each other to rearrange the tombstones in our life. Amen.